When you think of Paul Verhoeven's 1987 ultra-violent crime thriller RoboCop, does your brain jump straight to horror? After all, what makes a horror film? Or better yet, what made a horror film in the 80s?
You may not like what you're going to see.
If you ask me, a dark sci-fi style noir film with brutal kills, body horror, excessive drugs, and of course even some TNA, is well suited to be on our list of iconic horror films that deserve to be praised and properly deconstructed. Over the years, RoboCop has grown to be a rather difficult franchise to get a hold of. With multiple sequels, a failed remake, and a recent hit video game, it's safe to say that the movie that spawned such a vast catalog must be incredibly interesting, and I am happy to say that it is. RoboCop is a movie that packs action, suspense, political satire, identity crisis, amazing gore, and, most importantly, a strong lead character, Alex Murphy, a newly transferred Detroit police officer whose murder leads to his rebirth as Delta City's new sheriff, RoboCop.
Drop the gun. You are under arrest.
So, in today's episode, we're gonna revisit this classic 80s action romp and figure out what makes it tick all these years later. If you're ready, then give me 15 minutes and a like on the video, and I'll give you the world. I'm Kier with JoBlo Horror, and you're watching Deconstructing.
RoboCop. Who is he? What is he? Where does he come from? He is OCP's newest soldier in their revolutionary crime management program.
RoboCop is the story of Alex Murphy as he involuntarily volunteers to have the remains of his dead body be reconstructed by Detroit megacorporation Omni Consumer Products into a high-tech super cop who is only programmed to do three things: serve the public trust, protect the innocent, and uphold the law. Of course, as the OCP gains more and more power, RoboCop will get closer and closer to solving the mystery of his own death and taking out the company that made him.
You're our product, and we can't very well have our products turning against us, can we?
The movie is widely held as one of the greatest action films of all time and is considered to be one of the best films in general made in the 1980s. And in order for us to properly figure out why we love this movie so much, we're gonna be breaking down this movie into our four key categories. First, we'll talk about the movie's origin, where we dive into how it got from an idea to the page to the big screen. Then we're gonna talk about the movie's legacy, where I get into the vast franchise that this movie spawned, as well as some individual moments that make it a standout film in today's pop culture zeitgeist. After that, we're gonna lighten the load a little bit with some trivia, where I give you some fun facts about the production, and then finally we'll close it off by talking about the movie's X Factor. where I look for the one individual gem that took this movie from being just another sci-fi action film to the blood-soaked treat that it really is. Brace yourself, folks, because it is time for RoboCop. In the early 1980s, a junior story executive at Universal named Edward Lumiere had the idea for a cyborg cop learning to exist and cooperate with the complexities of human intelligence. While stumbling into a job at Warner Bros. On the production of Blade Runner, another 80s sci-fi classic, Lumiere picked up the skills and confidence that he needed to write out a loose outline for his idea, and so began the incredible process of getting the movie greenlit and into production. Similar to Alfred Hitchcock's iconic film Psycho, Lumiere and his writing partner Michael Miner opted to tell their story by killing off their main character in the first act of the film. While Marion Crane stayed dead in Psycho, Alex Murphy is only partially dead, as some of his memories are stored deep down in his new cybernetic body. To add even more layers to this complex script, the writers also wanted to heavily poke fun at the 1980s business culture and excess lifestyle. This is best seen in the movie's hilarious and unsettling commercials and news broadcasts seen throughout the runtime.
You haven't dismantled your MX stockpile.
Pakistan is threatening my border.
That's it, Buster. No more military aid.
These themes are something that Lumiere found himself fascinated with, even stating once that the idea for Ed 209's brutal boardroom malfunction was inspired by multiple times where he'd find himself daydreaming that a robot would burst into his boardroom and shut everyone up. To drive that home even further, that's why the killer robot is called Ed. Like Edward. Not exactly the workplace experience we aim for, but do you, Ed?
Your move, creep.
The film's first draft script was picked up by Orion Pictures and was originally titled RoboCop: The Future of Law Enforcement, but was eventually shortened down to simply RoboCop. But in order to get the movie made, writers Lumiere and Miner were instructed to watch movies like Dirty Harry and Mad Max 2 in order to get a sense for the tone and style that the studio was looking for before they went back and wrote a second draft. With a script in hand and a studio budget, Paul Verhoeven was approached to direct, but he turned down the gig. Twice. It wasn't until the third time that he was asked to read the script that Paul Verhoeven decided to take on the project, and the director stated that what changed his mind was the satire angle that he found to be refreshing and bold within such a violent film. In terms of the cast, the movie is fully stacked with talent, and as much as I could praise the characters in this movie, the actors giving them life are just as worthy. We've got Peter Weller in his iconic performance as the titular RoboCop, Nancy Allen as his hard-ass partner, Kurtwood Smith as the film's villain, who we're definitely going to be talking more about, and even a small role from the legendary Ray Wise. Not to mention one of the most despicable characters in all of the RoboCop lore, Bob Morton, played by Miguel Ferrer.
We're projecting the end of crime in old Detroit within 40 days.
Seriously, that guy. The film started out shooting in 1986 with an estimated budget of $11 million, and part of that budget was meant to be allocated to obtaining the same production team from the Blade Runner film. But when it came time to write the check, Verhoeven was forced to choose between a kick-ass RoboCop costume or a kick-ass production team, but he couldn't have both. Obviously, it all worked out because the look of RoboCop is beautiful and the sets are still pretty incredible. The movie was mostly shot in Dallas, Texas and was full of on-set shenanigans, which we're definitely going to explore more in the trivia section. So, with a great script, filming underway, a cast of kick-ass actors, and a cool-looking suit, it was time to release the film. where to start with this movie's legacy? When we talk about RoboCop, we're most likely going to talk about the insane brutality of the violence in the film and how unforgiving some of these kills are. Specifically, the Ed 209 malfunction, which leaves an innocent OCP executive reduced to a pile of guts in front of everyone in the room. Of course, Paul Verhoeven is no stranger to extreme violence in cinema, as we can see from films like The Fourth Man, Hollow Man, and Flesh and Blood. Even his more comedic approach to Starship Troopers had its fair share of guts. But this movie's legacy is built on more than excess blood and action. The movie also had an iconic character with the potential for Hollywood's favorite drug and greatest crutch: franchising.
I don't know about that. I've been through a lot.
Like many of the movies we break down on this show, this movie was quickly turned into multiple movies with only a few years passing between each film. It's easily the most iconic role that Peter Weller has ever found himself in, and with good reason. When I talk about RoboCop from now on, I'm gonna be talking about Weller as Alex Murphy, a charming but fully competent everyman with the right balance of edge and polish. Then his performance as RoboCop, cold, scripted, but still full of personality. Peter Weller is RoboCop. No offense to the attempt to revive the film's status with 2014's Joel Kinnaman-led RoboCop remake, but this role only requires one guy, and that guy is not you.
It didn't work, but you tried. Something went wrong.
You're fired!
Aside from the two poorly received sequels, there was also a cartoon as well as a few TV series which chronicled the continued adventures of RoboCop. Not to mention the video game which saw the return of Weller as the voice. Have you played it? Is it awesome?
I figure that's dead on.
Thank you.
The scene that reveals RoboCop for the first time is about 30 minutes into the movie, and it really takes its time charging up our anticipation as the camera teases us with small glimpses and reflections of the high-tech street soldier before finally giving us the money shot.
Serve the public trust, protect the innocent, uphold the law.
Just like any great accomplishment in cinema, the setbacks and odds were stacked against this production in many ways, but one of them being that to make a suit look this good, the costume department needed more time than they had to get it up to par. Luckily, the production was able to stay on schedule, but Weller was unable to rehearse with the suit before filming his scenes. In many ways, I actually think this adds to the robotic nature of RoboCop's movements. If Weller had been more comfortable moving in the suit, he may not have had such a slow and intimidating performance, and it may have made the character less believable as a cyborg. I don't know, but to me, those little things really make a difference when it comes to a movie being scrutinized like this nearly 40 years later. Okay, so here's a funny story from the recently released RoboDoc, a documentary on the making and legacy of RoboCop. While on set, gun safety expert and weapons master Randy E. Moore was prepping an explosion for a scene while having a midday snack with a stack of Oreo cookies, when Weller reportedly walked up to him in full RoboCop attire and in character and said to him, "Robo wants an Oreo." To which Moore replied that he could only have the Oreo if he asked him out of character. Weller refused to break character and began shouting from the top story of the set, "Robo wants an Oreo," causing a bit of a spectacle on the shoot. Randy Moore then decided to shove the entire stack of Oreos in his mouth and let the crumbs fall to the floor right in front of Weller, which apparently made him very upset. Mr. Weller, of course, denies this event ever happening, but what do you think? Was he embarrassed about his behavior, or does he really not recall Robo wanting an Oreo? Also, hey man, if you're in character as RoboCop, you do not want an Oreo, because we all know that RoboCop only eats baby food.
Oh, thank you. I'm not hungry.
And before we move on, let's see if you can answer this question. After the success of RoboCop, Paul Verhoeven opted to use fake TV commercials as a way of developing concepts in his movies. Which other Paul Verhoeven films utilize fake commercials? Here's a hint, there's two of them. A. Total Recall. B. Basic Instinct. C. Black Book. Or D. Starship Troopers. Comment your answers down below. This may be the most difficult time I've had with this segment yet. Not because this movie is better than the others I've covered, but it certainly has a lot going for it. I avoided talking much about Kurtwood Smith as Clarence Boddicker because the plan was to pin this entire section of the video on him and focus on his ideal portrayal of a menacing villain. He's a little bit Jack Nicholson, a little bit John Malkovich, and a whole lot of crazy. The movie has a lot of villainous characters in it, but Clarence and his gang are the real enemies here. And Kurtwood Smith plays the character as a smooth-talking, never cracking under pressure, calm and collected opportunist. He's cold as ice, but he's smiling the entire time. It is fucking art. But it's just not the X Factor.
You probably don't think I'm a very nice guy, do you?
I also considered using this section to talk about the film's legendary score by Basil Polydoros, which uses industrial Foley and metallic sounds to create a futuristic soundtrack that plays perfectly into the final act's more orchestral and intense composition. It's so good that I kind of wonder why this guy wasn't hired to compose the remake. But alas, I cannot give it the title of X Factor. And you know what? The truth is, we all know what this movie's standout element is. And I'm not talking about Ed 209's stop motion animation situation, or whatever that is. But what I'm talking about, what the real X factor of this movie is the film's final line.
Nice shooting, son. What's your name?
Murphy.
This movie rules. There's a lot of brilliant and thoughtful filmmaking that went into delivering this underdog turned blockbuster, and it all wraps up with a line that reveals the movie's true meaning. The Robo in RoboCop isn't what makes him special. It's the cop in RoboCop. The individual whose uncompromising sense of morality, of empathy, of justice is what saves the day. RoboCop was an experiment born out of greed and harmful ambition, but the journey he goes on to discover the Alex J. Murphy underneath the high-tech suit and corporate coding is what makes RoboCop a true cinematic hero.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.